put the numbers from 1 to 10, you can firstly use print statements without any loop, and you can print 1, print 2, print 3, etc. But if I tell you print the numbers from 1 to 100, then it doesn't make sense for you to have 100 print statements. So in this case, the use of a for loop, it makes more sense for us to use a for loop. So for X in range, and I want to print the numbers from 1 to, I'm not going to go, well, I could go 100, but if I want to go 100, then the loop has to go from 1 to 101, and I'm going to say print, and I want to print the numbers, so I don't need any message. I can just simply print X. And if I give that a run, if I scroll all the way to the top, it starts at 1 and it finishes off at the bottom at 100. So that's a very simple loop to print the value of X, print the numbers from 1 to 100. Now, what if I ask you to find the square of the numbers? So, for example, the number 1, you print the square of the number. Number 2, the square of the number. Number 3, the square of the number. All the way up to 10. So for each number from 1 to 10, I want you to print the square of each of those numbers. Now, you have to know what I mean when I talk about the square of a number. The square of a number simply means multiplying the number by itself. So the square of 1, 1 times 1 is 1. The square of 2, 2 times 2 is 4. The square of 3, 3 times 3 is 9, right? So I want to output 1 and the square of 1, 2 and the square of 2. I want to output 3 and the square of 3. And I want to continue doing that. I want to continue doing that up until 10 and the square of 10, which is 100. So in this case, if I ask you, well, we just did it to print the numbers from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. We've just done that. But now I'm not just asking you to print these numbers here. I'm not just asking you for that. I need additional information. I also need the square of the number. So I want to output the number plus the square of the number. So I want the square of the number, right? So to output the numbers from 1 to 10, it means that this loop is going to go 1, 11, right? So if I give this a quick run, the first part of it is done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But next to that, I want the square of that same number. I want the square of that number. So I could do it all in one print statement. And I could say plus, let's leave a space between the number. And I want the square of the number, which is X times, that's the times symbol, X times X. So here, I'm finding the square of the number X times X. Here I'm leaving a space, and here I'm printing the number itself. So as X loops through, when X is 1, it'll print 1, and it's going to print 1 times 1. Then X becomes 2, it's going to print 2 and 2 times 2. And then X becomes 3, and then it's going to print 3 times 3. So let's give this a run and let's see what that outputs. Now it's complaining, it doesn't like something, right? Obviously here, X needs to be converted into a string. So let's just put that in. And similarly, we need that to be converted into a string as well. It says unsupported operands, int and string. So now I've made everything into a string. So as you can see now, if you look at the output, I've got 1 and the square of 1. I've got 2, the square of 2, 3, the square of 3, 4, the square of 4. And that goes all the way up to 10 and the square of 10. So what's the square of 8? Well, the 8 squared is 64. I can see that 8 squared is 64. What's the square of 6? 6 squared, 6 times 6 is 36. So I'm multiplying the number by itself, and that is called the square. Similarly, if you want to find the cube is multiplying the number by itself 3 times. So you could do this plus str x times x times x. So now I've got the number x, I've got the square of x, and I've got the cube of x, right? If I give that a quick run, there we have our answers. So if I want to know what's the cube of 7, 7 cubed is 343, 7 squared is 49. So using the loop, I can very easily and quickly get these answers if I want to. So I hope you understand this. It's just showing you how to deal with the loop and how to do calculations in the loop. If you wanted, you could have stored the square in a variable like this. I don't know whether any of you would prefer doing it like this. So I'm doing the calculation of the square, and now when I output the variable. Confused with what I'm doing. All I chose to do now is I'm working out the square in a separate step. I'm storing it in a variable. And when I need to print, I'm just printing the variable. Similarly, I could say cube equals x times x times x and print the variable cube. So in this instance, I am doing the calculations that the question will ask you to do. I'm doing the calculations. And then once I've got the calculation, I print the variable. This is the variable that is going to give me the answer. So if I had to give that a run, you'll see I'm going to get exactly the same answers. Nothing has changed. The cube of 7 is 343. Some students will say, but now you're adding 2 extra steps to the process. I like using just one print statement. Whichever way you prefer, that's accepted. Some may prefer this method because it's easier to understand. You got the calculation stored in variables, and then I'm printing the variable. So there's no single way of solving a problem. You can solve it in different ways, and I'm just presenting different solutions that you could use to solve the problem.